Everyone, thank you for joining us today. My name is Carolyn Holmes. I'm the new Information and Liaison Officer for the Municipality of Jasper with the Jasper Recovery Coordination Center. I will be moderating this town hall today. Please note that this town hall is being recorded and we will be posting it online so that people who could not make it today can see this. And if we experience any connectivity issues, please be patient with us as we log back in. Our Wi-Fi has been temporarily spotty lately. The Municipality of Jasper respectfully acknowledges that the municipality is on Treaty 6 and 8 territories, as well as the Jasper House Métis District. This land is a traditional territory, meeting ground, gathering place, traveling route, and home for the Deneza, the Assiniwaki Winawak, the Assiniwaki Neo, the Nehiowak, the Anishinaabe, and the Sahuet Muck, the Stoney Nakoda, the Mountain Métis, and the Métis. We had been showing on the screen the contact information for the municipality and for Parks Canada Jasper Recovery Coordination Center staff that you can reach out to should you have any questions after this session. We will also be posting that in the Q&A and we will show it again at the end of the session. We also have the information there for the crisis support line if you feel that you could use additional supports. Tonight, I'm here with Logan Ireland. He is the Recovery Project Manager with the Jasper Recovery Coordination Center. Hi, Logan. We have Rob Dupree, the Director of Consumer Relations with the Insurance Bureau of Canada. We have Erin Saunders, the Planning and Development Manager with Parks Canada. And we have Dallas Lindskoog with EllisDon, who is the lead contractor for the mass debris removal. They will each briefly present, and then we will go into a Q&A session. This is a reminder that tonight's questions should be geared towards debris removal. We understand that you may have additional questions, maybe not related to debris removal. If you do ask those, we won't be answering them in this session, but we can add them to a Q&A on the municipal webpage, or you're welcome to send those in an email, but this session will be geared towards debris removal questions. Also, if you can refrain from posing your questions in that Q&A feature until after the presentations, as we think that the presentations may answer several of your questions. We will go over how to pose your questions after the presentations. So I would now like to invite Logan Ireland, the Recovery Project Manager from the Jasper Recovery Coordination Center, to speak.
Thanks, Carolyn. Good evening, everyone, and thank you all for joining us tonight. As Carolyn mentioned, my name is Logan Ireland, and I'm the Recovery Project Manager for the Jasper Recovery Coordination Center. Also known as the JRCC, the Jasper Recovery Coordination Center is a partnership between the Municipality of Jasper and Parks Canada, with the collaboration of government agencies and industry leaders such as EllisDon and the Insurance Bureau of Canada, who have joined us tonight. The JRCC has been guiding and coordinating a safe, cost-effective, and complete recovery effort. We are grateful for the opportunity to share with you tonight the care and consideration that is guiding the debris management process and the overall recovery efforts in Jasper. We know this is a challenging time for residents. I want to thank you for your patience as we move through recovery together. We're all in the same boat, and every oar going in the same direction helps. I also want to give my gratitude to my fellow speakers and all of our colleagues involved in the JRCC for getting us to this point and for making the time this evening to address and alleviate concerns of the people of Jasper. As Carolyn mentioned, there will be a section of time dedicated to questions and answers. The speakers will address points relating to their specific field of expertise, and please rest assured that there will be ample time for any additional points to be clarified afterwards. I'd like to take this opportunity to give you an overview of the priorities guiding the debris removal efforts from a bird's eye view. Throughout this process, safety has been and will continue to be paramount. There's been careful consideration and due process allocated to each step of the journey to ensure that the safety of the public, workers, and the environment is our top priority. There is careful waste identification, handling of materials. There have been documents created, such as the supplemental mitigations from Parks Canada. Every existing regulation, whether it be provincial, municipal, or federal, will apply to every work site, and each debris removal action will be treated with the same requirements and will follow guidelines that ensure public safety is paramount. After that, our priority is cost effectiveness and efficiency. This is one of the reasons that Rob from the IBC and Dallas from EllisDon will speak to. This is why the bulk debris removal program is in place, because of the cost effectiveness. Ultimately, we're all incentivized to keep costs as low as possible for our residents and to protect their insurance claims. The third goal is expediency. Once safety and cost effectiveness are accounted for, then expediency is the next priority on our list. Initially, we had aimed for a goal of November 30th, and that was motivated by a psychosocial desire to see town cleaned up and to help with residents' mental health throughout the healing process. As reality set in and careful consideration and safety and cost effectiveness were taken into account, we adjusted our sights to aim for a new goal of having debris removed by spring 2025. This will allow for the town to be prepared to rebuild in the optimal construction season of 2025. So overall, we are looking forward to supporting the recovery efforts and seeing debris removed in a safe, cost-effective, and relatively expedient manner. With that, I'm happy to pass it off to Rob Pruis from the Insurance Bureau of Canada.
Thank you, Logan, and good evening, everyone. I'm Rob Pruis with Insurance Bureau of Canada, and I'd like to share some information with you about our involvement with this particular wildfire and helping lead the recovery of the community. So we're here to talk about the residential bulk debris removal program. So I mentioned I'm with Insurance Bureau of Canada, or IBC. So who is IBC and why are we involved? We're the National Industry Association for Canada's private home, auto, and business insurers. So we're not the regulator and we're not a government entity. We're actually a nonprofit private organization where we act as the collective voice of the insurance industry to try to help coordinate the 140 plus insurance companies that operate in Alberta in a coordinated, efficient, and effective fashion. Now, the insurance industry itself, many of you would be familiar with the local broker, Hub International. They're the people that sell the actual insurance policies. They're brokers and agents, and these collectively are the insurance representatives. And then you have the actual insurance companies, or we call them the insurers, and their adjusters. And if you have a claim, you would have an adjuster assigned to help guide you through the actual process and talk about your policy. It's the actual insurance companies that are providing the funding for your actual claim. And on the far right, you have us, Insurance Bureau of Canada, the nonprofit industry liaison. We're trying to share information with the residents and working with the governments and the various entities that are involved to help with the recovery of this particular community. We have to remember that this is the second costliest insured wildfire in Canada's history, only behind the Fort McMurray wildfire in 2016. And what our role is in this particular recovery process is the insurance companies, through IBC, we help develop a coordinated appliance collection and disposal program, as well as now we're at the residential bulk debris removal program. So with the appliances, many of you had appliances that had spoiled food. This program collected over 2,300 appliances, safely degassed, and ultimately disposed of these appliances outside of the national park. And now we're working towards a residential debris removal program. And the insurers, through a competitive process, they hired a cost consultant and project manager, and that's EllisDon. And really, they've been brought on to help manage these programs on behalf of the insurance companies that have subscribed to be a part of this program. And really, that coordinated debris removal program, it helps ensure an efficient and effective process. And we also want to make sure that we're complying with all of the municipal, provincial, and federal requirements. Now, these types of programs are not new. We've been involved at IBC with these programs in the past, particularly in Alberta. So in 2011, with Slave Lake, there was coordinated programs that went on, and that community coincidentally had about 30% of their homes and businesses were damaged or destroyed in that wildfire. I mentioned in 2016 in Fort McMurray, there was a coordinated appliance collection and disposal and a coordinated debris removal program in that particular event as well that we were involved with. And now we're working in this community and trying to make sure that we do have an efficient and effective process that's also cost effective, because we know that many of you are concerned about your policy limits and how this applies. And doing things in a coordinated fashion really helps protect you as a resident and make sure that you have sufficient funding available under your insurance claim to make sure that you're allowed and have enough money to rebuild. So we're talking about the next steps in the debris removal program. We'll hear from Parks Canada and EllisDon in a moment, but the first step is talking and speaking with your insurance adjuster about the actual claims process. They're there to help guide you through. No two insurance policies are the same. So even though your house and you may be in a similar situation to your neighbor, they could have very different policy wordings, very different limits, and they could have different endorsements and wordings in their particular policy. So that's why you need to work specifically with your insurance adjuster. Now, in order to get the debris cleared, you need to sign 2 authorizations. One is specifically the EllisDon debris removal work authorization. And the other one is the Parks Canada leaseholder authorization. EllisDon needs both of those. We need to be using both of those authorizations to submit for the actual debris removal permit. Now, both of these authorizations, once they're signed, can either go to your adjuster, who will send them to EllisDon, or you can send them to EllisDon directly to make sure that they have them right away, and just copy your adjuster for their awareness. And the email address is up on the screen. And that information is also on the Municipality of Jasper's website. And those authorizations, as I mentioned, they're needed before any debris sampling or debris removal work can take place. And they're really aids in planning an efficient process. Many of these and many of you and your neighbors, you're in a very similar situation. So we want to try to work in areas where we're dealing with all the debris and cleaning up those areas at the same time. That makes for a more efficient process. Now, right before we hear from Parks Canada and EllisDon, at IBC, we do have a consumer information center, so we can help answer general insurance questions. Now, we don't have access to your policy wordings or specific details about your policy, so we can only share with you general information, but you can reach out to us by phone or by email. And we have a whole bunch of information, including many of your frequently asked questions on our website at ibc.ca. Now, without further ado, I'd like to introduce the next speaker, and that's Erin Saunders. She's the Planning and Development Manager with Parks Canada. Erin, please go ahead.
Thank you, Rob. Good evening, everyone. My name is Erin Saunders, and my regular job is the Realty and Municipal Services Manager for Jasper National Park. You may have met with me in that role. Right now, I am working through the JRCC, leading, helping to lead land use planning policy changes, as well as all development, including these demolition permits. So a lot of what I'm going to say is very similar to what Rob shared. So Parks Canada was really focused on creating streamlined process for demolition permits. So we moved from a 2-stage permit to a 1-stage permit process for this cleanup. And really step one, as Rob mentioned, is to contact your insurance company. So determine who's going to do the demolition and debris removal work. We see all variety of applications, from lessees themselves who have a contracting background to EllisDon to other contractors. Parks Canada will issue permits to all contractors. We don't have a preferred contractor from the Parks Canada side. Of course, there is a lot of great work being done to do things efficiently and in a streamlined approach, which makes a bulk removal process a really great choice, but it isn't the only choice. So we need 2 forms in order to process a demolition permit. So we need the actual development permit application. Now, this could be filled out by yourself as the lessee or someone that is authorized to do it on your behalf. So that could be your contractor. And in order for your contractor to do that, we do need that leaseholder authorization letter provided from you so that Parks Canada knows that you're authorizing them to work on your behalf. So once the forms are submitted, our Parks Canada development officers process them and send them back out. They do include supplemental mitigations, other permit conditions for you to follow or for your contractor to follow. And if you have any further questions, obviously I'm available now, or you can send questions to this email address, or you can give us a call at the number provided. And with that, I will pass it over to Dallas with EllisDon.
Thanks, Erin. As was mentioned, the name is Dallas. Last name is Lindskoog. I'm with EllisDon. I'm a construction manager. My home office is located in Edmonton. EllisDon is very proud to be brought into the process to help Jasper recover. On behalf of EllisDon, I do want to reach out and say a special thanks to IBC for initially involving us in this process. And we've been excited to be part of the development of the bulk residential debris removal program. And we're excited to partner with the residents of Jasper in the advancement of recovery. The presentation that I'm going to go over today will cover a few topics. A little introduction to EllisDon, a little bit about what we've been doing in the last few months, and also some summarized answers to questions that I've been receiving and our team has been receiving over the past few weeks, including over the last few evenings where we've had an open house at our offices here in Jasper. Thanks to those of you that may be on the call that attended in the last couple of days as well. So who is EllisDon? You may have never heard of us until we arrived in Jasper. We have been in business for 65 years. We're an employee-owned construction service company. Our offices are located all across the country, regionally, Edmonton being the closest, but all across the country. We have long-standing relationships with insurance companies, every one of them that is involved in Jasper's recovery, and as you heard, with the Insurance Bureau of Canada. Our experience spans all types of construction projects. We value quality, safety above all else, and we want to bring that to the residents of Jasper as we help the recovery. Why should you choose EllisDon? It's a fair question. I want to let you know that we offer a turnkey solution for Jasper. And what that means is that every aspect of the debris removal process that's been described up to this point in the presentation and that you'll learn about tonight can be handled by EllisDon from start to finish. You might wonder what we've been doing in the last little while and why a lot of it, maybe debris hasn't occurred yet. Logan alluded to a lot of the planning and coordination efforts that have been ongoing. It's been a pleasure for us to be involved in collaborating with the municipality and with Parks Canada and alongside IBC and in close proximity to regulators like the Occupational Health and Safety Branch and Alberta Environment within Alberta. All of this has been to develop a best for all debris removal strategy. Safety for residents and workers is above all else the primary focus of what we do at EllisDon. Everything we do in this business, we want our workers to go home safely, and we want to not impact the adjacent residents to any project that we work on. And Jasper is no different. So I'll go into some frequently asked questions now and hopefully answer some of the ones that maybe you're anxious to ask tonight. If I don't go into enough detail, feel free to put a question in the chat, and we'll try and address that further. The first question that I want to talk about is why we are using a budget price and not a fixed price or lump sum price. The reason is we first went to the market. We have contractors all across the country and locally within Alberta particularly that do this type of work, every aspect of this type of work. And we asked them, would you prefer to price this work as a unit price, meaning by the kilogram, by the hour of work, or as a lump sum fixed price? And the feedback that we received was that it would be difficult to price when the contamination level is unknown. And we'll talk more about that in this presentation and throughout the evening, I'm sure. They also conveyed that it'd be difficult to establish the weight of the debris that's needed to be removed from each individual property. They conveyed factors affect transportation in a national park. As I'm sure all of you are aware, once in a while there's a traffic jam that's caused by wildlife. There's also logistical constraints at the landfills that are nearby. The nearest landfill, as you know, is Hinton, and it's not a large landfill. They've been involved in the process early on, and they've been able to do things on their end that are cost effective for the benefit of all of Jasper and for the benefit of every contractor bringing debris to that facility. But it's not a large facility. There are limitations on how many loads can be delivered to it on a given day. So all of those factors, when considering unit price and lump sum, were considered. And it was determined that fixed price would only increase the cost in order to cover the risks that I described just now. Second question that we hear every day is, how are our budgets calculated? At the highest level, the total estimated cost is summarized together, and it's divided by the building footprint in Jasper to arrive at the dollars per square foot that we have put on our budget pricing that you've likely seen. It's important to recognize, as the illustration shows on the right, that the footprint we're describing is the footprint of the home and not the square footage that you would use in a real estate fashion if you were selling your home. It's also important to note that that is not to be multiplied by the square footage of the entirety of the lot. It's only the dark red as shown in the drawing there. So the factors that contribute to that total cost, the largest is the weight of the debris itself, for obvious reasons. The estimate that we put together was based on prior wildfires, and we arrived at the cost on average per square foot of residential property in Jasper. There are some factors that affect the weight. Obviously, if it's a single story versus a two-story, there's going to be more debris to remove and more weight from that two-story. Similarly, a mobile home traditionally would have less weight. If the home is constructed on a basement, the foundation plays a factor into how much weight is removed from the property. And in some cases, there is no basement. The second most contributing factor is whether or not there's contamination. Now, when we talk about contamination, we're really describing the likelihood of asbestos-containing materials being within the home prior to the fire. We're required under the regulations, and this is the same as pretty much anywhere that this type of work would be done, to first sample and test the debris to ensure that there is no asbestos-containing materials. So that cost has been included in our dollars per square foot. We've also included a cost for what it would take to contain that asbestos when it's removed from the property. And that containment is by bagging it. Large bags, you'll see a photo later in the presentation of what that looks like, and also water sprinkled on the debris as it's being loaded into the transport truck. The third and fourth are costs that have been included, that really flow down to become something that is known as a time-based cost. And I'll talk about all three of these briefly independently. Number three is the disposal trucking. Obviously, Hinton is a distance from Jasper. It's quite a bit different than other wildfires where the landfill was close, where the landfill may have been owned and operated by the municipality that experienced the wildfire. And therefore, the estimated travel times were considered when we developed the dollars per square footprint prices. The fourth is the landfill constraints that I alluded to earlier. We've been in close communication with the Hinton landfill to understand the specific restrictions that are just inherent with that facility. And there are a maximum number of loads that can go there. That's been considered. Additionally, when I talk about we've asked the market, when we went out to the market for this pricing, we asked them to also consider other landfill opportunities that would be a mitigation or an alternate should Hinton's landfill not be able to take the debris on a given day. The price that we published includes the cost to transfer the material to a further landfill facility if necessary. In other words, no delays. As a result, the truck just continues on beyond Hinton and heads out in a region near Drayton Valley. That is at no additional cost. That's been factored in. These two things then, as I mentioned, are the time-based costs. That really allows us to understand how quickly and how many properties in Jasper are reasonably expected to be removed at a given time. How many areas that we work within, and we'll probably talk about areas as far as EllisDon defines them at this point shortly or later in this presentation. All of that leads to a duration. How much time is spent at each individual property. That leads to the estimated costs for things like the support, the equipment and the manpower that has to be available to do that work. So all of these are added together and then divided by the average square footage of the footprint of the buildings in Jasper. Question 3, we're often asked is, do I have to backfill? It's a very valid question. The answer is possibly. What's important is to maintain the stability of adjacent properties, and that has to be maintained at all times. You can imagine if a basement foundation walls are removed, the stability of the soils around that basement become unstable. And in order to keep the stability, there is a certain amount of backfill that must be placed in order to prevent collapse and potential impacts to the adjacent property. Now, if there is a desire to backfill entirely, that is certainly something that EllisDon can do for you. We would encourage you to have that conversation first with your insurance adjuster and then communicate that to us. But I want to be clear, it's not entirely necessary to backfill everything. There may be other impacts by not backfilling, things like continued fencing that have to be considered, among other things. And we can help discuss that with you one-on-one as the case may be for your particular property. Question number 4, we're often asked, are you planning to recycle concrete and metal? You can imagine that that takes a lot of weight. And obviously, if the weight doesn't go to Hinton, it's not scaled, and therefore the unit price per kilogram, or per ton in that case, is not tracked. So the answer is that our budget pricing right now has taken a conservative approach. We've assumed that we'll not be able to recycle, but that certainly does not mean that we're not trying to. Recycling metal is very common. The contractors that we have involved are intending to recycle metal. What that means for residents of Jasper and those that are participating in this program is that that weight will not cross the scale, and therefore the dollars per square foot contributing weight, that cost, does not come back to that particular property, and the savings are effectively dollar for dollar passed on to the homeowner. In terms of concrete, something similar is also being explored. We can't say at this time if it's a dollar for dollar, but if it's anything and not being disposed of as waste material in a landfill, there will be cost savings to the residents of Jasper, and we're motivated to do that, and we're in active discussions with our contractors to set up a process where that can be done. Question number 5 that we've gotten frequently is, how do you make sure that the costs are only my costs? And this is completely reasonable. We have a very robust cost tracking system that's set up. And that is done in collaboration with all of our contractors that are doing the work. Every dollar that it takes to dispose of material based on the weight at the landfill is tracked by load, every single truck to that property. Similarly, for the crew that has to do the abatement control, if that's needed on your property, every hour that they spend doing that is traced to the exact property that that work was performed on. We have set up boundaries and procedures and processes to ensure that the costs associated with the removal and containment of debris as necessary and contaminants and adjacent properties will not be billed back to you as a homeowner or to your policy and your insurer. And that's very important to understand. We're often asked, can you save my driveway or my fence or my shed or some feature within my property that hasn't been damaged by the wildfire or is salvageable? The answer simply is yes. Right now, only fire damaged structures must be removed for obvious reasons. That would include a zone around the home where the debris has fallen and contaminated the grass, the flower bed, whatever might be in immediate proximity to the home. By immediate, I mean 1 or 2 meters. We have industrial hygienists that will participate in that process to determine the boundary that must be removed and then determine the boundary of what can be retained. That inside that boundary can be your driveway or your fence or your shed. And we have a system in place already established, and we've already been discussing the features to save with residents of Jasper, and we have tagged information to that property to make sure that when the work begins, that the fence, the shed, the driveway isn't removed accidentally. It's a very easy thing to manage, and all you need to do is communicate that to your adjuster or communicate that directly to us if you've joined the program and when you fill out the forms that were referenced before by Rob. I just got to find the right button. There we go. Number 7, we're asked sometimes, what if my neighbor doesn't want to participate in the bulk debris removal program? I want to be clear that we fully understand that it is not an obligation. We would love for you to join the program. We're happy to help you. And we recognize if you don't want to, that's okay too. So if you are a person that has subscribed to the program and your neighbor has not, fear not. We can do removal of the debris from one single property where the neighbors are not participating. The cost benefits may be reduced by doing that as a result of not having the efficiencies that come about by working in a zone side by side. And that's just something that you need to recognize. Timing may also be affected. Our goal is to expedite the debris removal. So our focus right now is to apply for permits through Parks Canada for groups of homes and properties that are adjacent to each other. Therefore, if you are a single or 2 people side by side that want to participate, there is potential that that may be later in the process. The last question I'll cover is, do you remove all of my grass and landscaping? And I kind of alluded to that before. The short answer of that is we can. The longer answer is discuss it with your insurance adjuster. Make sure that there's coverage under your policy. But certainly if there's a desire to remove all of the soft and hard landscaping, as we refer to it, we can do that for you, and we can make the lot ready for the rebuild when you're ready to do that step. So that's the end of the questions that we've put together. Hopefully that answers a lot of the questions that have been on your mind, but we're happy to answer more tonight. And I will hand it back to Carolyn this time.
Thank you, Dallas. So just before we open up the floor to questions, I just want to go over a few housekeeping items. So in order to ask a question, we're going to get you to use that Q&A feature. It should be at the top right-hand side of your screen. In that, you can type out your question that you have. You may also see some questions that have already been posed that were maybe similar to your question. And if that's the case, you're welcome to like that, like give it the thumbs up little button there that's below that question, or even the little arrow, which means vote. So you can vote up that question. It just lets us know that several people have the same question, and it keeps that Q&A a little bit cleaner, just so that we don't have multiples of the same question that I have to then search through. I will read the question aloud and direct it to who I think is the appropriate speaker to answer that. And if it's the inappropriate speaker to answer that, they'll hand it to the right person. We will do our best to answer all the questions in the time that we have, but if we're unable to get to your question, please feel free to reach out to us after this via email, and we'll be able to get to that after the fact as well. So I'm going to start right away here with a question from Len, and their question was, will you be looking for a complete development permit? Many will not know what they are building. And I'm going to give that to Erin to start with.
Great. Yes, thank you for the question. It's a great question. So there's actually two permit processes that we'll have to go through to rebuild. So the first one is the demolition permit. So that enables the demolition and debris removal and cleanup. It gets the site safe and ready to rebuild. And at the end of that process, that's when, if lessees are, not in a position or, making their own choices of whether to rebuild or not, that's at the stage at which they can then sell their lease and complete a Parks Canada assignment for that vacant lot. The second stage is that full development permit and then subsequent building permit to rebuild the structure that you'll place on there. So two stages. The presentation tonight is really focused on the debris removal process. So I'll put the link in the chat. I see there is another question about the link to that, which lays out very similarly to what I mentioned in my presentation, with all the forms and directions on how to complete. And if you have any questions, please follow up.
Perfect. Thank you, Erin. This next question is for EllisDon. So Dallas, I'm going to read it aloud though. So the EllisDon work authorization form that each individual leaseholder signs contains no pricing information. The budget pricing listed in EllisDon public notice is $55.88 for contaminated and $48.67 for non-contaminated traditional homes. Can we rely on these prices as being firm? How will the comprehensive budget price for each individual leaseholder be documented? Will the work authorization form be amended to reflect the price?
Okay, that's a lot of questions. So Carolyn, help me if I miss any. The short answer is a firm price is what I discussed earlier in the presentation that the market told us was not the way to go. And the reason for that obviously is the pricing of the risk factors that they would have to carry. Now, the pricing that we've developed is to give you an indication of what the expected cost could be. And I've attempted to explain some of the factors that affect that price and really affect the weight of the material, as I've kind of said quite a few times in the presentation. Help me out on the second question or second part of that then, Caroline, please.
Yeah. And so how will the comprehensive budget price for each individual leaseholder be documented?
So as an example, every truckload that comes in has a single form that's filled out with a unique identifier number. It's a duplicate or a triplicate form. The time the truck arrives, the time it's, if abatement control measures are needed, all of that is tracked and documented for every single load, literally minute by minute. When it lands or gets to the landfill, we know what time it gets there. That load is tracked through the landfill to understand exact weights of what went across their scale. They provide an invoice back to us based on that weight, and that is what flows down to the property. So it begins with proper tracking of the material when it's being loaded onto the truck. Similarly, with the crews that do the abatement control, they're obviously not a truck driver. They'll also have a form. They keep track of when did I start putting the double bagged containment into the truck? When did I then seal it up before it left the site? All of that is tracked property by property, address by address, so that the costs are directly transferable to that property of that policy if that's being covered by insurance.
Perfect. Thank you, Dallas. This next one, actually, I believe is also for you. This is a question from Chelsea. If we have to backfill to protect the integrity of the ground around the footprint of where the house once stood, is the cost of the backfill material and trucking that goes along with that included in the price of the debris removal? And is that backfill removal, when we are ready to rebuild, included in that price as well?
That's a great question, and one we get a lot. So the cost of the material to backfill has been included with some assumptions on how many properties would need that. The way that was handled for the purposes of developing the budget estimates that you've seen is to assume that roughly half of the properties would require full backfill. The simple way to say it is if you expect to have the entire property backfilled, the cost may be slightly higher, but if you don't need the full backfill, the cost would be slightly lower. The cost to remove that material would be in part 2 of the process that Erin was describing before as part of the rebuild. When EllisDon completes the debris removal, only the hole is left, effectively a partially backfilled basement pre-existing. It's just left with a sloped side to be stable for the adjacent properties, and then the demo process ends at that point.
Perfect.
Thanks.
Yeah, Dallas, you're on a roll, so we're just gonna keep giving them to you.
That's fine.
Kathy, and maybe this isn't you, maybe it's Erin, but Kathy was wondering if concrete can be disposed of in the park.
That's a great question. I think I'll let Erin answer that question if that's okay.
Sure. Thank you for the question, Kathy. Jasper doesn't have a landfill. We have a transfer station where we accept materials that have to be trucked outside of the park. So in order to accept materials that are have been damaged in the fire, so it's a certain classification of material, and only the Hinton landfill and other designated landfills are qualified to take that unless they undergo other testing. So Parks Canada does not have a place for it in the park.
Thank you, Erin. Okay, an anonymous guest asked, if my property tests positive for asbestos, how do we know that the contamination didn't originate from another property? Dallas?
Yeah, I can take that one. It's a fair question. There is the probability that it didn't happen that way, but there is some chance that it could have as well. We are aware of some properties where the debris may have been pushed into an adjacent property that was part of the firefight, or potentially collapsed and landed on the adjacent property as well. It would be a case-by-case assessment done by the hygienist that's employed under our program. They would make a recommendation of where they believe that material may have originated from. And in cases where it may have originated from a different site, we would have conversations with both insurance adjusters in that scenario to determine how we separate the material, perhaps beyond property boundaries, but more to the real condition, to say that literally this pile came from this location or this yard and lot, as opposed to not the one that it perhaps is currently existing upon. In other words, we can work with you to help separate that cost to ensure that the appropriate party is paying for the contamination if it wasn't originating from your property.
Perfect. Thank you, Dallas. We're going to switch this one over to Logan, I think. Someone was saying that they're not currently residing in Jasper. How will they be made aware of when demolition and debris will occur on their property?
Yeah, thanks for the question. I can take that one. We have a few different ways in which we're trying to communicate about debris removal as a whole. For your specific property, that will depend on the contractor who's actioning this site. And I would recommend getting in touch with your specific insurance adjuster, and through them, the contractor on your site. Once a development or a demolition permit is issued, there could be a delay, and we can expect delays as the hygienist will need to go on site and then do testing and wait for those test results to come back. So the specific day that the debris removal happens is not necessarily determined by the day at which the debris removal and demolition permit is issued. So the best point of contact would be through your insurance adjuster and ultimately the contractor.
Perfect. Thank you. Jill is wondering if the samples for hazardous materials need to be sent away, or are the results on site? I think, Dallas, that could be you.
That's a good question as well. The testing is done by qualified individuals based upon requirements within the regulations, first of all. The testing and sampling, I should say, then at that point is done on site and then packaged up in a manner that meets industry standards and is suitable for what's required to be done at the testing laboratory. Those tests themselves are not performed in Jasper. They will be shipped off to a facility typically in Edmonton. And the turnaround time, generally speaking, is 1 week for asbestos containing material.
Thank you, Dallas. I think another one for you, Dallas. How much of the town is expected to participate in the bulk removal um, based on participants so far and past wildfire recoveries?
I'll let Rob talk about past wildfires, but I think the easiest way to answer that is EllisDon and our contractors that are partnering with us are equipped to take care of it all if everyone chooses to join the program. But it's at this point difficult to predict how many ultimately will join the program.
And I can supplement that for past events. There's been a number of these programs that have gone on across the country, and they range between about 70 and 90% participation of the destroyed areas. Obviously, the more people that are involved in the particular program, there's more efficiencies. So you can be clearing entire blocks of buildings at the same time because there's a very similar process utilizing these contractors. And just to confirm for everyone, on the insurance side, you can use the service provider of your choice, but you want to make sure that the pricing that you're getting is also reflective of all the work that needs to take place. There's sampling that needs to take place. There's a number of other requirements that will be taking place during that process as well. So there are efficiencies with being a part of this program to make sure that your debris is cleared efficiently and importantly, to make sure it's done right, that we're complying with all the necessary regulations to keep the entire community safe.
Thank you, Rob. The next question is from David. They're wondering, are the sampling and testing guidelines for demo from Parks and Jasper posted somewhere? And are they the same for each property? Also, are the guidelines set in stone or are they being reviewed or revised? I think Logan or Erin, you're likely best suited for this one.
Sure, I can take that question. We do have them posted. We're partnering with the municipality on that, so I'll post the link in the chat. Are they the same for each property? In general, yes. Our commercial properties have a higher risk of contamination depending on what they have stored on site. So our impact assessment team is assessing all of the commercial properties separately for that potential. And then are the guidelines set in stone or are they still being reviewed? They have been modified slightly over the last few weeks. So to help clarify language. So the intent behind them hasn't changed, but for example, we put out a new version just yesterday, just seeking to help clarify the backfill comment. So just to adapt the wording a little bit. So we may continue to modify them to help clarify any questions in the future, but in general, they are set. Thank you.
Thanks, Erin. Next question, I think Dallas, we're heading back to you. Can another agency do the contamination assessment and then EllisDon do the removal based on that report?
Yeah, short answer to that is yes. However, in the context of grouped properties that are applying for demolition permits together, there would need to be some collaboration with the EllisDon hygienist to ensure that the other adjacent properties that we're taking care of are combined in the same report that needs to be shared with Parks Canada. In other words, those results would need to be provided to us. But there would be opportunity for cost savings if the tests did not need to be duplicated. Ultimately, though, our hygienist would ensure that all of the package that's provided to Parks Canada contains everything necessary. So if there are gaps in the tests that were performed by an individual leaseholder, we would have to fill those gaps in order to be compliant.
Thank you, Dallas. Mountain Operations is wondering if, for apartment buildings, how can tenants be involved in the debris removal process? And will our tenant policy claims be affected in any way if claims are not fully settled by the time debris removal begins? Not sure which of you would like. Yeah, Rob. Great.
Yeah, thank you. I can talk about the tenant insurance piece. So the tenant's claim will not be impacted whether or not the debris is done sooner or later. So you can have an open tenant claim and the debris can be cleared. They won't have any impact on that side of things. With this process, we're clearing the debris. So with these totally destroyed properties, people had the opportunity to utilize Team Rubicon that came in to do the sifting for any potential items that may have been there. Would the tenants be involved in the process other than the usual participation of knowing when that particular debris was being cleared and when testing and different pieces of the process were going to be involved? That information would be posted on the Municipality of Jasper's website.
And yeah, Dallas, please jump in.
Yeah, I thought it would be beneficial to add that when we talk about the bulk residential debris removal, that does extend to condo units and maybe better described even as townhomes. They are a bit more complicated to arrange in the fact that they're obviously shared walls. And we have had people join the program already that perhaps their adjoining townhome has not yet. It's entirely possible to do it. It will just require an extra level of collaboration and coordination with adjusters for each of the individual townhomes in that scenario. But it is achievable, and we are working towards that in some locations in Jasper already.
Thank you. All right, someone is curious. Dallas, this is for you. They requested an estimate from EllisDon. Will they receive that back before the work begins?
The estimate can be calculated by the leaseholder themselves now based on the pricing that we've provided and multiplying that by the footprint of the property that was involved in the wildfire. If I'm speculating that question, when they say estimate, may be more referred to a lump sum price, as I described in the earlier part of my presentation. In that scenario, no, a lump sum price will not be provided in advance of the work being done.
Thank you. And a follow-up to you again, Dallas. What is the cost for garage pad removal?
That's a great question, and I have to be honest that the garage. Sorry, let me back up. The footprint of the garages was not on the data that was provided to us. The map that I gave a little snip of, where you've probably seen the red outline of the homes. Therefore, we don't have accurate numbers that we can estimate right now for debris removal when it comes to a separate garage. However, the same principles apply. The weight of the material that comes off of that property and from that garage is what is billed back to the lease. Some benefits of a separate garage is that there may be less likelihood of asbestos contamination. And in some cases, there may be opportunity to salvage that garage slab and only remove the loose debris on top. Again, it comes down to early conversations directly with your insurance provider and the adjuster, and then communicating that to EllisDon as far as what you want to have removed. We don't have to remove it. The one thing I would throw in there as a bit of a caveat is, in some cases, gaining access to the home and the debris from the home pile may require driving equipment over top of a garage pad, which could cause damage.
Thank you. Dallas, again for you, what is the expected average cost per home that you expect? Most homes are about the same size. You must already have an idea of these estimated costs.
The easiest way is to just do the math for you live here right now on the call. If you've got a 1,000 square foot home that is the footprint, not necessarily the real estate square footage, multiplying that by the approximate $55 that we've published, with the assumption that you have a basement and with the assumption that you are going to have contaminated from asbestos, and also with the assumption that a large portion of the yard is also removed. All of those contributing factors gives you a bit of a top end or high end estimate that you can use. And that would be reduced by things like the recycling I've described previously, and also things like a lesser basement, let's say, not as deep, perhaps of lighter material, all of those factors. Our goal, though, in providing that budget pricing was that you could take the square footage of your footprint home and multiply it by the number that's most appropriate for your situation.
Thank you, Dallas. I'm just going to put it out here now. We are getting close to time. We will try to get through the questions that have been posed already, but if you could please refrain from asking more questions, as we will not have time to get to them. So we are going to try to work our way quickly here through the questions that have been asked. But again, if we could just stop adding more questions to the Q&A for now, that would be great. Again, you can put those questions in emails and we can get back to you moving forwards, but we will try to power through these ones that are already listed here. So again, for you, Dallas, when the contractor removes debris in the basement, can I keep personal stuff if they find anything?
That's a great question. The answer is a big maybe. We can certainly work with you to try and do that. However, I want to point out that recognizing it could cause some delays, and those delays ultimately would really just be the crew doing the abatement work and loading the trucks. There may be additional costs as a result of having to slow down, but we're willing to work with you, absolutely. If it's safe and we're able to get access to locate the material you want to salvage, it's something that can certainly be considered and just needs to be discussed again with your insurance provider and the specifics of your property. As an example, I've got superintendents in Jasper here all the time, every day of the week, and we could set up an arrangement to go and look specifically at your property to understand what constraints might be there to do that type of work.
Thank you, Dallas. We're going to keep on with you. You talk about having to water down the debris before removing it. How is the weight of the water accounted for? Do we have to pay for that extra weight?
The short answer is yes. However, I want to be clear that the weight of the water is not significant. The industrial hygienist that we have employed has been given the authority to optimize the amount of water that's necessary in order to keep the dust down and minimize and eliminate, frankly, the ability for that contaminant to become airborne. It's not like a hose is out there soaking everything so that it's dripping wet. It is just made damp in order to not spread. And we've made it very clear that excessive water will be penalized against the contractors. And like I said, given the authority to the professionals, which are those hygienists that monitor this type of work, to make sure that the weight is minimized wherever possible.
Thank you, Dallas. Will EllisDon be contracting work to local contractors?
Yes, it's probably relevant to note something that I don't think has come up in the presentation at all today is there is an aspect of the work that requires the services that go to every property to be capped and isolated. And by services, I mean the sanitary and the water. That scope of work, we are working with Jasper Concrete locally. They will be doing that work for EllisDon as part of this process, and they'll be working in close collaboration with the contractor that's doing the debris removal itself.
Thank you. Logan, we're going to hand one over to you to switch it up a little bit. If the property is not fully backfilled, will property owners be required to arrange for or pay for fencing until the rebuilding can begin?
Thanks for that question. That is a possibility. It would be best to discuss the specifics of the required payments with your insurance adjuster, as it depends on your specific insurance claim, and also with your contractor and their ability to safely leave the space and close out the permit. So depending on how that permit is closed out, whether it's signed off on by a structural engineer or it's backfilled or graded, there may be a requirement to leave fencing in a certain part of the area, and that fencing cost may be taken on by the insurance claim or handled in a different manner. So I would suggest running that question directly to your insurance adjuster.
Thank you, Logan. I think we're going to go right back to you, Dallas. Do we need to remove burnt cars, skidoos, sheds, etc., metal?
The debris removal needs to be, I would say, capturing everything that's going to be in the way of your rebuild as an easy answer. More complicated answer is the vehicles are covered under a different insurance policy. I can let Rob speak to that. We can work with you if necessary, but generally speaking, debris from a vehicle is left on the property and handled through your insurance company that handles the vehicle insurance.
Rob, please.
And Dallas is exactly right. The vehicle insurance provider, you need to reach out to your insurance company to make sure that they're aware of what that is and they can make the necessary arrangements to be moving your vehicle. If your vehicle does not have insurance, so you don't have fire insurance on your vehicle, it's now uninsured. So it's your responsibility then, because no insurance is involved, to be able to safely remove and dispose of that vehicle.
Thank you. Next question, what percentage of asbestos is their trigger point? Dallas?
I'm definitely not a qualified hygienist. That's why we've hired the professionals to work alongside us. So I can't give you a percentage, but my understanding, and anybody can correct me if I'm wrong, is that any amount of asbestos typically that's contained or that's found on the property has to be segregated and handled accordingly. I think it's reasonable to expect that in most cases, the entirety of the property would be deemed as having asbestos, but not in all. And every case will be evaluated independently. And that would be done by our industrial hygienist. It would be their recommendations that we would choose to follow.
Thank you. Next question I think might be for Rob. What will happen with debris removal at uninsured properties?
If your property is uninsured, and unfortunately we've heard that some people may be in that situation, you are then responsible for the cost of that debris removal. We want to make sure that the debris is removed from the community in a timely fashion. We know that some of the non-government organizations like the Canadian Red Cross may be able to assist people that don't have the appropriate insurance coverage. So I encourage you to reach out and share information with them and work with them to understand what your options are and what supports may be available to you to help make sure that your debris is cleared so we can get the community into a safer place.
Thank you, Rob. This next one I'm going to hand over to Erin. So Chelsea's wondering, what is the expectation of parks for the materials used for backfilling? Contractors are restricted with materials they can use and where they come from for these types of projects. Will materials be provided by parks for backfill, or will allowances be made by parks for backfill material that they might not have allowed in other circumstances?
Yeah, I'm not sure I'm the best person to answer these questions. I think that's a question that's probably best between the contractor and our environmental surveillance officers on a case-by-case basis of where the material will come from. Parks Canada isn't in a position to supply materials, but we will work with contractors as much as possible to make sure that the use that the final use of the grade of the material matches the use.
Thank you, Erin. Another question, why are some businesses able to remove debris now, no mitigation in place? Erin, maybe?
Yeah, I can. So some businesses have received their demolition permits. If you have concerns that you don't feel like they have the proper mitigation systems in place as required, you can contact our office with a complaint. Alberta Occupational Health and Safety is on site as well. They have multiple people going around to make sure that from the OSH legislation that they're abiding by their mitigation measures as well. So there are lots of eyes out there, but if you have any concerns, please let us know.
Thank you, Erin. Dallas, this next one's for you. Before they duplicate testing, will EllisDon be checking first with the leaseholder's insurance company to see if testing for asbestos, et cetera, has already been completed by an external agency, for example, ASK Environmental?
We won't specifically reach out, but what we've been experiencing is in a few cases, the adjuster has already let us know that they have done that testing themselves and that they intend to provide that data to us when we group that particular property with others nearby.
Thank you. Is there a list of recognized or approved occupational hygienists available?
I can answer that if you'd like.
That'd be great.
The occupational health and safety has certain requirements that all contractors must follow, not just EllisDon. And the qualifications are typically an industrial hygienist or an occupational hygienist. They have to be professionally trained and they are required. There is ability to research online. I don't have that available right now, of course, but where you can find out who is a registered hygienist in Alberta or BC nearby areas in order to determine other options that might be available for you.
Thank you so much. Okay, I think we have gotten through all of them. There is a couple that we've replied to in the chat itself or on the Q&A itself, but we have answered all the questions that were posed. Thank you so much for attending tonight's session and for asking all your questions. Again, if you do have any additional questions or any follow-ups that you would like us to address, if you could email us or which the email address, there we go, thank you so much, is listed there. It's also listed in that Q&A, and we will be posting this chat this town hall online on the municipality's website under the debris removal page. So if you'd like to come back and see that or send that to your friends, please do so. And thank you for joining us today and have a great evening.